Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We got another truck in here today. So this is JD's truck. He brought it over here and said, hey, I got a bunch of stuff that needs done. So the list of stuff is going to be a new steering box, an intercooler kit, I'm going to do up pipes, rebuild the turbo, wicked wheel 2, and I think a new steering shaft for the steering box. And a couple little miscellaneous things as far as steering goes, and some tie rod ends. Nothing crazy. However, this truck is a little bit unique. It's a Southern truck, I do believe. It's pretty clean. He bought it as a two-wheel drive super cab long bed truck. It's a 94 and a half. So it's not a 94, it's not a 95, it's a 94 and a half. It's very specific about this truck. So only 94 and a half. So 94 and a halves only came with a 5-speed if it was a 7.3 Power Stroke. And it'll say turbo diesel on the fender here and not Power Stroke. And it's got a couple unique features that I wouldn't say that they're features, but they're unique. So you have a different width pulley for the whole accessory drive, which means a narrower belt. It has one rib less than your standard 7.3 Power Stroke. And you could only get these in a 5-speed, and they actually don't have provisions in the wiring in the dash for the automatic stuff. So you actually can't put an automatic in one of these without changing some wiring. So the 94 and a half is a little bit unique, and he made it even more unique. Obviously, you can see that we have some Baja retrofits in here, but Baja HIDs. He did the 08 nut bumper. And he has 08 axles under this. I think they're 08. They're 08 or 09. So he has that. So he did the axle swap on it himself, bought a lot of the parts, did it himself, and four-wheel drive swapped it because it was two-wheel drive. So he's got a pretty decent truck here, just needs a little bit of love now. So he brought it over here and said, hey, this stuff needs done. I don't have time to do it. So I'm just going to go over this truck with you real quick and kind of show it to you, show you what he did to it. And we're going to fix a couple little issues here and there. We're going to adjust these headlights for him and get all that other stuff put on and just give it a once over and let him know if it needs anything else. So let's check this truck out. So it's a rare color combination. This is an early model color. This is I want to say it's like Tucson bronze or copper. I can't remember the actual name of this, but this is a factory color for this truck. It's very, very hard to come by. A lot of guys do like it. But you can see that it's got the flatbed on it, and you can see that it has the newer wheels here. And you've got the axle swaps stuff under there. He did do the updated leafs in here and used the conversion brackets to run the different leafs. Seemed to work out pretty good for him, which is nice. E-brake does work for him, which is even better because it is a 5-speed truck. But we need to look at getting the pedal replaced because it's not adjusting right. But it's a nice truck. It's a little bit dirty on the inside, so we're not going to open up the door for you. But it did have a really, really nice bed on it, which I currently have the bed that was on this truck because he was driving it and, on his way home and was turning into his driveway, and a truck rear-ended him and hit it in the back pretty good. So he ended up putting this flatbed on instead of fixing the bed. But so it's got a flatbed on it, and we have some stuff to do here. You can see that the headlight is not exactly adjusted well. So we're going to make sure that we fix that up for him. Because in order to do the intercooler, we have to take the whole front of this truck apart. Get the grill out of here, the headlights, the bezels, the header panel. I'm hoping that this bumper isn't going to cause us any problems. And you can see in here that he is using the Complete Performance bumper brackets for this bumper. Over here, pretty nice truck. And then we have our whole slew of parts here that we're going to be installing. And hopefully I'm going to be able to cover some of this with you guys. So we're going to go ahead and get started on doing the steering box today. That'll be our first order of business, is do the steering box, get the steering stuff done. We'll start waiting on some parts for the turbo. So we're not going to get into doing the turbo today. So we're going to go ahead, get you a little bit of a walk around this truck, and then start on the steering box down here. He's also running a one-piece rear shaft on this truck. which I need to ask him about that and see how it's doing for him. It's something I would love to do on my other truck because it's just, I hate that carrier bearing. But it's a pretty clean truck under here. It's a nice truck. It's a good truck. Just needs a little bit of love, but it's nice that it's not all rotted out in the corners or nothing like that. It's a really clean, straight truck. So we're going to try and make sure that he is able to enjoy it the way he wants to. So let's get started into messing around with the steering box. I do have other videos about us tearing these steering boxes apart, but this one's going to be a little bit different since it does use the 2008 steering box up here and not your 05 to 07 box. So this is going to be a little bit different. So it's not your typical swap. So we got the inner fender out here and we took the wheels off, and actually we ended up taking all of the steering components off, including the stabilizer shocks. So we have to do some maintenance up here. We said at the beginning of the video that we're going to be doing the steering tie rod ends, 2 tie rod ends. Ended up finding out that one of the steering stabilizers was actually loose, so we have to repair that, which is no big deal. And then the drag link on the pitman arm was actually loose as well. So hopefully that didn't egg out the pitman arm. We'll find out when we get it out. But we got everything off of the front of this axle here as far as the steering goes. And the reason we did that is this truck, like I said, is using the 08 steering box. So we got to get the steering box out, and having all of that suspension and steering and everything in the way here, it makes it difficult to get the steering box in and out, trying to work around all this. And we had to do some service to the steering anyway. So I pulled it all out. We actually got all of the joints soaking, so hopefully we can get it apart a little bit later. But we're going to go ahead and start getting this steering box disassembled and taken out. And I wanted to show you what we're going to be doing here. So this truck already has the 08 box in it. So we're not modifying the frame to install the 08 box. We're just taking an 08 box out and putting an 08 box in. Now we are using a Borgeson steering shaft and knuckle. I did clarify that the knuckle fits. So if you're using an 08 box and you want to use a Borgeson steering shaft, this is the number you need for the collar, 034956. So this is what fits the steering box. Now we have to get everything out, including the intermediate shaft and the box. I've already drained the reservoir, so hopefully we don't have too big of a mess. We got to get the lines off. Once we get the lines off, we got to also get the pitman arm off. I may do the pitman arm first because the lines are just going to make a mess. So we got to get the pitman arm off, and then we got to get our lines off of here. And then at that point, we can go ahead and get the intermediate shaft off and get these bolts for the steering box out, and then we can get the box out. So luckily we have the tools to get the pitman arm off. So we're going to start with doing that first. We're going to go ahead and get this pitman arm off. So that way that's done out of the way, and then we can go ahead and work on these lines. So we have our torque adapter that we use to put these on with, and hopefully we'll get this off of here. So we got our nut off of the steering box here. The puller isn't going to quite fit in here with the track bar here. If you remove the track bar, you'd be able to get the puller in there without an issue. However, we shouldn't have any problems getting the steering box out with the pitman arm attached still. So we're going to go ahead and get the lines undone, and then hopefully be able to get this box out of here, get the lines undone, and get the steering shaft off, the intermediate shaft. So hopefully we can get all that taken out and not have an issue with that. There is one thing here that I'm going to show you guys. Now he's running, I do believe, the Sky manufacturing track bar mount. If you look right here, see that? That's not good. So I'm going to have to clean that up with the steering box out and weld that up. So we're going to have to get that fixed. So that's no good. But we're going to go ahead and get everything disassembled here and get this box out. So here we are up here. We have the intermediate shaft bolt. It's a 13 millimeter. So if your steering wheel is straight, the bolt will be on top, which is great, which makes it easy. So we're going to have to take that out of there, and then these two lines. Now, like I had said before, he'd already put in this box in here, so I can't give you the information on actually retrofitting the 08 box into your OBS truck. So we do have these two fittings here, and we've already drained the reservoir up here, and the return line can stay attached. So we're just going to pull these two lines off, get this intermediate shaft out of here, and then we can take the three larger bolts. You can see the one here in the corner of the screen. So we'll get these three larger bolts out, and then that steering box should come out of there. So you can see that there's a bolt in this rag joint here. So you have your steering shaft bolt, and then you have this other bolt back here on top. So when you run the 08 box, you have to use the 08 shaft end here because the shaft coming out of the box is different. So that's where he has these two different bolts here. So in that scenario, we have to use a little bit of a thinner socket on the intermediate shaft bolt here. So just pull the bolt out, and you can pop this off of here. So it slides off there just like that. Now we can get these lines off of here. These are 18 millimeter on the 08 truck here. So when you pull this out of here, I was just checking to see there is an O-ring on the end of that. So you have to make sure you don't lose that O-ring because you will need it eventually. Just pull that up out of the way there like that. We can go ahead and get that other one loosened up. Which, hey, it's already loose. Perfect. This actually wasn't tight at all, which isn't a good thing either. So same thing here, there's an O-ring on there, and definitely making a mess. So we do have a pan under the box here. So we got everything disconnected there. So we're gonna go ahead and get these bolts out down here. So we'll get these guys taken out, and then that will let the steering box come completely out of the truck. These guys are 22 millimeter. Now, when we loosen this last one here, there's not going to be anything holding this steering box in. So I've got to make sure that I hold it up so that it doesn't fall on me. Just like that, we've got the steering box sitting out. We'll go ahead and remove this pitman arm and start getting everything set up for the new box to go back in. But we also have to take the intermediate shaft out from in the truck. So we got our puller here. Goes on there like that. Take our link bar, put it in, put a little bit of pressure on it. A little point goes inside the pin there. Now this can go either way. Since we're using it this way, we'll go like that. Just snug it up like that. And this uses an 1.1/8" socket. So put this guy on here. Just like that, we got it pulled off of there. It's a lot safer and a lot easier to do these off the truck because this thing falling on you would hurt, and Snap-on gives you a strap to hold this whole kit and caboodle together and keep it from falling on you as well. However, it's a lot easier to do it outside the truck here like this in a pan. So we have our pitman arm here. You can see there's a tiny little bit of wear there because that rod end was loose, but doesn't seem to have egged it out bad at all. So that shouldn't be an issue. So we'll get this cleaned up too as well, and we'll get this box out of here out of the way so we can get the intermediate shaft taken off. So here we are inside the truck now, and you're looking for this bolt right here. So that bolt there is what holds the intermediate shaft to the steering column up in the truck. So you're going to remove that bolt, and it should be a 13mm. So now that the bolt's out, this shaft should just wiggle right out of there like that, and you can actually pull it out from inside the truck. So it'll slip right through that boot. So go ahead and remove that from outside the truck. So we got our steering shaft here. Just slide it out. Now this cover actually goes over the one line and actually covers up the rag joint, so we most people will not put it back on. Here's our Borgeson steering shaft compared to our original shaft here. I'll pull this one out all the way, and you can see the length slightly different here, except for there's one problem. The Borgeson shaft is much, much longer. So we have compressed, compressed. Now we are going to be using this universal, and we're going to be taking this universal off and not using it. We will be using the one that we mentioned earlier in the video. This is the replacement, and it's because it has a keyed shaft instead of a splined shaft. So this is a splined shaft on here. You can see that there's splines in there. So we are going to be removing this universal, replacing it with this universal. Now, we have the original shaft here, and I wanted to show this to you because this is the actually end of the 2008 steering shaft on this side that's silver, and this is the OBS shaft on this side. So to use the 08 box, you have to use the part of the steering shaft from the 08 truck and made it to the OBS one. So that's why you can see that these bolts are here, both sides. So that is an option for you. However, the right way to do this is to use the steering shaft with the correct universal. But I did call Borgeson and did confirm that they suggested to cut off of the hollow side, which would be the steering column side. They said that it is deeper and able to move farther than the solid shaft, which would be on this side. Now we may have to move this collar down, which this collar rides inside the boot in the firewall. So that's why this column, this shaft is, or this sleeve is on here to give you a seal on that firewall boot for the steering shaft. So we may have to loosen this up and slide this down to get the proper alignment and make sure that that seal's in there. But we're definitely gonna have to take this universal off and shorten this shaft and take this universal off and change it out to the other one. The whole purpose for the collapsing shaft, and I feel like a lot of people overlook this piece of information, is the reason that this shaft is collapsible is because if you were to get into an accident and have your steering box or frame rail remove or smash up into the truck, this steering shaft will collapse and keep the steering wheel or shaft from coming up through the truck and impaling you. Older vehicles did not have these collapsible steering shafts, and whenever people would get into accidents, the steering shaft would actually come up and, you know, induce bodily harm. So that's why these shafts are supposed to be short and collapsible so that they don't injure you in an accident. And when I did talk to Borgeson, he told me that there was discrepancies, that some people said they had to shorten them and some people didn't. And I feel that people just don't understand the concept of the collapsible shaft. It's not collapsible to make it easier to install or to make it adjustable. It's collapsible for a safety feature. So realistically, this needs to be much, much shorter, because even the original shaft in its current form, fully extended, is about the length of this Borgeson shaft fully collapsed, which is not good. So realistically, we're going to need to cut out probably 8 inches out of this shaft. So we're going to look at that into doing that. So we're going to jump over to the vise here, get these universal joints off of here, and see what we can figure out for cutting and measuring and moving so that this shaft mimics this original shaft as close as possible. So we're going to go ahead and remove this universal on this side here, and the set screws are 5/32, the nuts are 1/2 inch, your jam nuts. So just hold your set screw, loosen up these nuts, and then loosen the set screws up. And you can take them out if you wish. So we're just going to take these out for now. So the one is very, very long. It actually goes into the shaft. And does not actually go through, but it does go into the shaft. So you will have to drill a new hole here. So we're going to reuse that universal joint. And then this is the one that we're going to be not using again. So same concept. So that one does not have a through bolt, just set screws. So we are not going to be using this again. So we can set this off to the side where we won't be using it accidentally. And then here you can see the difference of the insides of the shafts here. You can see that the one is splined and the one is keyed instead. So you're going to take your new steering universal, since we're putting the 08 box in, and loosen up your jam nuts, loosen up your set screws. So that's going to be your first thing to do here. And I'm going to put this back on in the same orientation that the original one came off. Set screws on the same sides, so top and farther away. And tighten up these set screws. Then snug down your jam nuts here. Now I'm putting this on like this right now so we can get an accurate length with our original shaft here, so we can get an accurate point of cutting. So we know that these two things are going to be in the same plane, and then we need to figure out where to cut over here. So we're going to have to move this other shaft that's on the other side of the steering shaft here So we'll get that moved and hopefully be able to do something with it. So we need to do something with this shaft over here with this sleeve. Now this sleeve is going to be a problem because we need to cut a good bit out of this and make sure that we have enough collapsing length here. So we got an Allen key to fit in this set screw on the other side of this sleeve. I think it's like 3/32 possibly. There's no size written on here. So just loosen that up and you can slide this wherever it needs to be slid. So we have this sticker here which is kind of messing that up. So just kind of pull it off of there. All right. Now this is just on here. It doesn't have to go any specific way. It can go on either side. It's just that the set screw needs to be on one of the flats. So we can go ahead and trim this out. And what I'm going to do is make sure that this shaft is fully collapsed. And I'm going to go ahead and put a measuring device inside this tube here because I want to make sure that we're not going to get into the collapsed shaft. So just going to take an old piece of metal here. We'll do a depth check. So that bottom of that shaft is right here. Now, if we take our other steering shaft, line it up, you can see that that would actually be shorter than the original shaft would be. So we have enough there, which is great. So we're going to go ahead and actually just mark the end of this shaft on here and cut it there because we did a depth check here. Make sure that we're not going to get into the internal shaft. And we'll just put a mark on here and we'll cut this off. We went ahead and put the universal back on this side. You can see that the set screw's not in there. And I wanted to show you something here. So you see how these universals are different lengths? You need to take that into account when measuring this. Now we measured the depth earlier and we had put a mark on here, and I've since taken the marks off because I don't want to confuse you or myself about the length that this needs to be. Once again, we're doing the same thing over here on the steering box side over here. We're going to match these both up, make them as close to the same as possible. And we have a collapsed length here, and this is also collapsed all the way. So these are your collapsed lengths. So ideally, we need to put a mark here and then measure the length from here to the end of the shaft, which would be the very edge of this universal joint, so this open spot right here. So we need to measure that and subtract it from this mark because this universal is longer than this universal. It's about, I think, 1 1/8 inches difference between the two as far as length, maybe 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch. However, I did some measuring in the truck here earlier, and if I were to cut this at the same length as the original shaft without this universal, it ends up being 1 1/8 inches too short. So I actually had done some measurements with some stock that I had here just to see if it was going to be the right length, and it's not. So we have to make sure that we put this universal on. We took this universal off the bottom of the steering shaft inside the truck. We have to change it out to this guy anyway. So this is our collapsed length. Now here's the thing. Our extended length is really what we need. So I'm going to end up extending this lower shaft and extending the old shaft and putting a mark on the new shaft for our length, because we want to be at least as long as this old shaft here. So we need to make sure that we do that. So I'm going to go ahead and extend this new shaft on the bottom here, and I can either measure this shaft, which might be a little bit easier to do because now we have two flat ends here, and then measure the new shaft and put a mark on it instead of trying to match them up like this. Went ahead and measured our old shaft here, and it was 34 and an eighth. So that would be from here to here. So ideally, we want to be, say, 34 and a half. So that'll give this shaft a little bit of free play. It's still going to collapse a very, very good bit. So if our extended length is 34 and a half, we're going to be cutting this shaft somewhere in this general area. So that's fully extended, which is the match to the fully extended of this guy here. So we're going to go ahead, put a 34 and a half inch mark on here, and then we'll compare it to the original shaft. Now this white mark, which is very hard to see, is actually the end of our universal here. But we want to make sure that this is all going to line up. So we match up our two ends over here, make sure they're the same. And you can see that we're about a half inch, slightly less than a half inch longer than this guy here. Now if we collapse this, you can see that the amount of travel between the two, the original shaft actually goes farther collapsed than the Borgeson shaft. So we have an inch and 3/4 from end of shaft to, this would be our new end of shaft. Actually, I moved that a little bit. So let's recheck this again. So we're about inch and 3/8 there. So about an inch and 3/8 from end of new shaft to end of old shaft. And if we extend these, we are 3/8 of an inch. So at this point, the Borgeson shaft collapses 1 inch less than this shaft here. Now we have our mark here. We need to measure the length of the universal, and we need to measure it to this opening here, to the edge of the opening on this side. And the reason we do this is because that is the end of the shaft, and we are using the total end, including universals, as this mark back here. So this is 2 3/8. So we'll come back here. I always use the 1 inch mark here, and we'll go 1, 2, 3/8. So I know it's a 3 3/8, but that's because we started at the 1 inch mark on our white mark here. So that mark is right here. So we started at the 1 inch and added 1 inch, 2 inch, 3/8 of an inch. So this would make up for the difference of this universal. And to show you what I mean, we'll go ahead and take this guy out of here. So the end of our shaft would be the yellow mark here, which would be here, and then the end of the internal shaft would be right here. Now, if you're not sure where that needs to be, if you're not sure where that needs to be, you can always remeasure this. However, the inside of the shaft here is flush with this surface here on the universal. So whenever you put this back in here, this universal sits with the shaft flush with the inside of the surface here. I don't really know the technical name for that. However, we know that the end of the shaft needs to be here for our extended length, which lets us get from the steering box to the steering shaft. So we have a fixed length that we need to fit there. And if it's a little bit too long, that's okay. So you can see that we are going to be cutting a good bit off of here. So we're going to be cutting off approximately 5 3/8 of an inch of this shaft. Now, that's a little bit excessive in my opinion, because if you think about it too, fully extended versus fully collapsed is almost where this shaft needs to be. And, that's not what you really want. So you really want this shaft to be much shorter for safety reasons, like we had stated earlier in the video. So we went ahead and we got a length of shaft here, and then we subtract our universal length, and that's where we get this mark. So now that we have this mark, we can cut it here. And if it's a little bit too long, which, if I pull this guy out and pull these guys out, line them up on the opposite end here, you can see that our end of our shaft is going to be here, and you can see that it's a little bit longer. It's about like I said, a half inch, a little under half inch. So it'll be a little bit too long, which is fine. And you can see that we're going to line up with the yellow mark on the inside of this universal. If you're not happy with that length, once you put it all in, take it back out, trim it as needed. But we definitely don't want to be too short. And if it is too short, you can actually call Borgeson and get a hold of them. They can actually send you a new half of this shaft if you end up screwing this up. So Borgeson can be helpful for you on that position. If you end up taking the shaft and cutting it too short, you can get a new half of the shaft without having to buy a whole shaft. So that's very nice. So this is our mark to cut. So end of shaft. This will be the end of shaft that goes in the universal. So we'll get a good mark on here, and we will go ahead and cut this shaft off, and then we can go ahead and put this universal in the truck. So this universal will not fit through the firewall boot, so you have to put this in the truck first, and you can actually get a measurement from steering box to this universal in the truck with a tape measure if you wanted to, and we may clarify that one more time just to make sure that our figuring here is correct. So I'm going to go ahead, put this in the truck, and then we're going to remeasure this just to be sure with the tape measure. We'll measure from the inside here, and all the way to where the steering box would be. Since we're going to go and install the universal in the truck here, we put a little bit of blue Loctite on the threads here. We're using 243 specifically. They recommend a 222. So we put some Loctite on these bolts, on these set screws, because you don't want these to back out at any time. So keep that in mind. So we're going to install this in the truck. We're not going to take it back out because we won't need to take this back out. So when you put these in, make sure you use a little bit of Loctite on them. So we went in the truck and we measured from the inside of the universal joint. So that'd be from this mark all the way to the steering box over here. We had 31 inches from here to this mark is what we need. And you can see we're sitting at 32 1/8 if we cut the middle of the mark. So we are 1 inch longer than we absolutely need to be. So that'll give us a little bit of leeway here, and that'll take off 5 3/8 of the shaft here. So we're going to go ahead, cut this. We double checked our measurement because this can be collapsed a little bit, but you're still going to get the full collapsing that you want. And then at the same time too, you got a little bit more of that shaft buried in here, which is fine. Now, if we take and say, move this shaft in 5 3/8 of an inch, so we would want our total length to be somewhere around 31. So this would be perfect world scenario. This is the shaft uncut. So we have 31. That's our length, because that'd be the inside of the universal. And I'll show you how much collapses, how much you have to collapse. That's it. So if you were to get into an accident, you would have not even an inch of collapsible shaft. Now, that still buries this shaft in here a good ways, which is perfectly fine. It gives you a lot more surface area for them to turn. However, the way that you want this to work is you would like to have the collapsing ability for safety reasons. So the shaft does need to be shortened a little bit here. So we're going to go ahead, shorten this shaft the 5 3/8 of an inch, and that should give us the exact length that we need fully extended, which is what you want for a collapsibility issue. So, you have a little bit of play in here like this, just some wiggle. Even if you move it in, you get that little bit of play. It's still there. So as soon as this shaft moves a little bit, you get that little teensy weensy bit of play, but it's much, much tighter than, say, what you get with this, and you can hear it. So even these original shafts, they're pretty tight, they're pretty good, but you have a double here and a double here. So, I mean, the way that these things work is they'll collapse this far, and then they'll actually collapse again if it's that bad enough. You really want to have as much to be able to shrink as possible for safety reasons. So that's what we're shooting for here. So we're going to go ahead, and it'll actually be a little bit, what did I say, 3/4 of an inch, or about an inch too long than what it needs to be, but that'll give us some play over here on the steering box to make sure that we have enough. So go ahead, we'll cut that guy right there. So we got it cut and deburred there. The only thing we got to do now is we got to drill our hole. So there is a hole in here. So we'll flip this guy over so that we can get this hole drilled in here, and that is for the through bolt. Now you want to make sure you put it back in the right spot, because it is very imperative that this goes back in the exact same spot that it was cut off of. So you want to have this measurement here. So this measurement is a smidge over a 1/2 inch. And then you want to make sure you're centered in the rod here. So a touch over a 1/2. And then we need to measure, and it looks like we're right about at a 1/2 in the middle here. Looks to be about 7/16. So we can double check it this way, make sure that we're about the same here. So we're the same on both sides there. So now we'll go ahead, center punch that, and drill that out. So we'll use a pilot bit, and then we'll get a sized bit for this hole. Go ahead and drill our pilot hole. And we're going to use a 21/64 drill bit here. And we look to be pretty good there. Now you don't want to make this hole too big and have slop in that universal joint. You want this hole to be perfectly sized. So we're going to try that with a set screw here and make sure that that's going to fit in there. And if it doesn't fit in there, then we'll have to make it one size bigger. So you can see that fits in there very, very nicely, which is great. So now that we have that all put together here, dump anything out that's in there. And then make sure that you don't got any burrs in here that's going to screw you up for putting this in the universal joint. And then make sure that you go ahead and put this in. So that's what we're going to do now. So the one thing I forgot to put on here is this collar. Now the boot, so this rides in the boot of the firewall. The boot should be 11 inches from the end of this shaft. So you want to make sure that when you put this on, your 11 inches falls right in the middle of this collar here. So that's pretty much where it should be. So put your collar all the way down at the boot here, very, very close to it, because your center is right here in the middle. And then we loosen this up. We're going to put a dab of Loctite on here as well. So make sure that your collar is on there, because this is technically your sealing surface for the firewall. Then we'll go ahead and get this installed now. So we've already got this universal installed in the truck here, and you can see that we have the set screws in place here. And when you're doing the universal install here, make sure that you're not spinning the wheel round and round. You want to go one way and then take it back the other way, because if you have a truck with an airbag or a truck with an upgraded spring in it, a clock spring. So this truck has a contact wheel in it, doesn't have an actual clock spring with a ribbon. So if you have a truck that has a ribboned clock spring in it, there is a possibility for you to spin the wheel too many times and either over loosen or over tighten it, which could cause it to break or have any issues. So you don't want to do that. So make sure when you're installing this universal joint that you're not spinning the wheel all the way around. And if you do spin it all the way around, make sure you spin it all the way back one turn, or however many turns that you turned it. So that is a thing to keep in mind. So we're going to go ahead and get the shaft put in the truck here. So we're going to go ahead and get it put through the firewall boot, which you can see out there on the firewall there, and get it put in the shaft here and get it installed. You see we got the shaft in through the firewall here, and you want to make sure that your hole lines up with the longer universal or longer set screw there, which will be on top. You can see it slides in there. We'll just have to back it out a little bit. You can see it went a little bit too far. That's about where it needs to be, and hopefully we'll be able to get the set screw put in here. So if your measurements were proper, this bolt should go straight through that shaft and all the way through it and set on the other side. Make sure you tighten up your set screws. And you see I spun the wheel back the same way. Go ahead and put your firewall insulation up over your shaft there. So now that we have the universal installed inside the truck here with the new shaft, we can come out here and inspect how this is going to fit out here. Now we've already set the steering box back in. Obviously we had to do that to get our measurement. So we put the steering box in here already. None of the lines have been put on yet. Wanted to get this steering shaft installed before we went ahead and got everything else put in. So make sure this is going to fit. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to take this Allen bolt out of here. And we should be able to slide this shaft up and get it to line up, hopefully, with the new shaft here. So there is a keyed indent on the steering shaft, you can see here, and that's where the bolt is supposed to go. We may have to spread this shaft out, this joint out a little bit to get it to slip on here nice and easy, but there we go. Just had to get it lined up right. So once you get it put on there, go ahead, put your bolt back in. Now, I know we're doing this with an 08 box, but it's the same general concept with all the other boxes. Then you want to get this good and snug. So this is a 1/4 inch Allen key. So if you want to use a driver or some sort of socket tool to do this, which would be a little bit easier, I would recommend it. So we have the shaft installed there, which that's great that it fits. You know, there's a little bit of play in this yet, but I think it's just in all the universals. However, we also don't have the steering box tight because you can see that it's moving there. So we're gonna go ahead and tighten up this steering box now that we have all that installed. So we'll snug those up here in a little bit, but we want to just check for play. So you can see that that shaft still wiggles a little bit on there, so we got to tighten that up some more. So we tighten it up some more there. You can see that there's no more wiggle in that joint. So I'm also going to show you how our collar fits over here. So you can see how our collar fits inside the firewall boot. It's right where you want it, right in the middle, so you don't have to worry about it falling off any ledges. So we got the Borgeson shaft installed here, and got the new steering box installed here. We're going to go ahead and put our lines back together and get our pitman arm on and put all of our steering linkage back together. But that is the process of installing the Borgeson steering shaft inside of an OBS truck here. you can see it's a little bit tedious, a little bit time consuming, lots of figuring and measuring, but it's not too terrible. But if you have a worn out steering shaft, it's definitely a worthy upgrade and help with the steering feel and steering response. So we've got everything back together here. We have our steering box bolted in. We also have our lines all bolted in. We did put new O-rings on those, and we also topped off the system following Redhead's bleeding procedure. The one thing I do differently though is I'll run the starter with the starter button instead of starting the truck immediately. It lets me put oil back in the system up here slowly by myself, and then also keeps the system full because you can crank it a little bit and pour as you crank and not have to worry about the engine fan blowing fluid anywhere, and also not have to worry about running the system completely dry, because once you start the truck it goes real fast. So we did that, and we also ended up with the new tie rod end on this side and a new upper tie rod end on this side. Everything's been greased, and we reinstalled the drag link here with the new steering box, and we also repaired the cracked bar back here. So hopefully that will not crack again. But we did torque the pitman arm down to the 350 foot-pounds. We still have a couple little things to do here. So we have the bolt here for this rough country steering stabilizer. We got to cut that bolt off, and I got to clearance the cross member a little bit back here for the track bar. But we're going to do that a little bit later. I got to clean all this up really well because we don't need to start any fires, because I'll be doing that with either a plasma cutter or a torch. So we got to do that as well, but that'll be a little bit later. We also installed the rough country steering stabilizers here. He had them on here before, kind of cattywampus. He wasn't real sure how to put them on. So we had to take them off to get everything realigned here for the front. So we ended up putting these back on, adjusting them correctly. And you see this dent up here. So there's a dent right on top of the shock here. That is from hitting the drag link up top, because he had the shocks on top of the bracket instead of below the bracket, because he is stock height. So we had to do that as well. But nothing crazy. We got all the we got a new ball joint on this side, a new universal, and a new ball joint on the bottom here. Ended up with all Spicer parts there, which I would highly recommend for doing that. Those pieces are very nice. They are designed for this axle, so we use those in here. But we got the Borgeson shaft in here, and we got the 08 steering box put in here, and it's a Redhead box, and Redhead's instructions are pretty decent. The box is shipped pretty nicely, which I was happy about. But we got this whole front end here tidied up, and we still got a little bit to do here as far as work on this truck. But I wanted to cover all the Borgeson install on this, and then a little bit of differences with the 08 box versus the 05 to 07 box, which most of the guys use on the 05 and up axle swaps. But all in all, we got the front end all tidied up on this truck. Just some odds and ends to do. Just going to do some quick checks for the steering stabilizers here to make sure that they're not going to bottom out. Set them at 4 5/8, which is right in the middle of the travel. So hopefully they don't bottom out, and hopefully they don't overextend. We're going to run the wheel back and forth to make sure that that's not an issue. But I appreciate you guys watching the videos, and please share these out. So if these could help somebody, then share them out to people so that they can see them too. If you like the videos, please like and subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate it. So we're going to keep trying to make videos for you guys for these OBS trucks, and keep them coming. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll catch you on the next one.